Tom van Flandern. He's worked out from astronomical observations, from things on eclipses, from the movements of black holes around each other, from binary star systems. There's a lot of data that's relevant. But he's worked out that the speed of gravity must be vastly greater than the speed of light. That, to me, is an absolutely fascinating picture, and the fact that physicists have to treat it as instantaneous is their approximation to this immense speed of 20 billion times the speed of light. Newton thought that gravity was instantaneous, and he also thought that what it showed was that everything in the universe was related to everything else. And, Newtonian mechanics is often dismissed as being sort of crudely reductionistic and stuff. But actually, it's a completely holistic vision. What Newton is saying is that every particle of matter in the universe attracts every other particle of matter in the universe. Everything is interrelated, instantaneously interrelated, according to Newton. And he didn't know how to explain it. He speculated that actually the cause of gravity was the direct cause of the will of God, and that absolute space, everything was in absolute space for Newton. Absolute space was the sense organ of God. That absolute space meant that God knew where everything was and could feel everything that happened, because space was God's sense organ and everything's in space. So that was Newton's way of thinking of it. Leibniz's view was that every particle of matter, every unit of organization, or monad, as he called it, consciously reflects the entire universe from its own point of view. So Leibniz put consciousness in all matter, and said that in Newton's case, every bit of matter was related to every other bit of matter in an unconscious way from the matter's point of view, but consciously through the mind of God. What Leibniz did was put consciousness in each particle of matter with no absolute space. Everything now emerged from the relations. Each one had mirrored the universe from its own point of view, so every particle was in a different place from everything else, therefore saw it from a different point of view. So these very interesting ways of thinking go right back to the 17th century, when the idea of gravity first came up. And actually it's just as mysterious today.
I've been thinking about this actually in relation to the notion of love, because it strikes me that when Dante, for example, about whom I've written, concludes the Divine Comedy, he ends it with this famous vision in which he feels himself to be spinning, he says, like a perfect wheel with the love that moves the sun and the other stars. So within himself, he knows himself to be part of a reflection of, or an echo or refraction of, the love that is the dynamism that's moving everything else in the cosmos. And it's been making me think about how we might reimagine love, not just as a personal feeling, but as a sort of an objective fact. And the way that love's talked about, of course, love is talked about as a force of attraction, reaching across distance, and maybe more or less instantaneously as well. Whether there are links, and it's not just, I think, a linguistic possibility, because I also know that this vision of a cosmos filled with the influence of eros, of love, very much inspired Newton's sense that there could be a cosmos filled with the influence of gravity. The notion that there's a kind of field of God's will perhaps isn't, so much different from the old Dantean notion that love is that which fills all things and brings them, the spirited notion of their dynamism spinning with the love that moves the sun and the other stars. It's very striking that Dante's vision of God is not static. It is this very dynamic vision, in fact.
Gravity is essentially unitive. What it does is ties all things together, and gravity by itself would bring everything together. It brings things together. It doesn't separate things. It always brings them together. And the thing about gravitational force is that it's not diminished by being used. That, say, a meteor is going through the solar system, it's sort of traveling through free space, and then it's brought within the gravitational field of the Earth, and then it comes down and crashes into the Earth. The Earth's gravitational field loses no energy at all in causing that to happen. In fact, it gains gravitational mass because the meteor adds to the mass of the Earth, which now has a stronger gravitational pull. So here we've got something which loses nothing by bringing things together, and its whole tendency is to bring things together. Something that brings everything together and holds the entire universe together, prevents anything escaping from this togetherness of everything, is indeed like a kind of love principle writ large at the most cosmic possible level.
It's very, very fascinating. It makes me think of the old Aristotelian notion of God as the unmoved mover. And the point for Aristotle was that God is the sort of omnipresent attractor, if you like, which everything that's in the cosmos is seeded to desire and want. And the many different things in their different modes of existence are each in their particular way, ultimately, as a kind of final cause, as Aristotle put it, seeking, if one can use that metaphorically, seeking to fulfill that instinct, almost that impulse or habit that has been put into them by being part of this whole, wanting to find the fulfillment that the whole might bring. And I think this is very fascinating because I think one of the things that happened when gravity was born is actually remembered in the word itself. That the word gravity, of course, had existed before Newton and before other figures like Galileo were working on it, but it meant the tendency to have weight, not just as abstract forces, but as tendencies, directions of travel for entities that live in the cosmos, that are in the universe. Is that partly why this understanding of gravity interests you? Because it does seem to link to more purposeful or meaningful ways of imagining physics and the cosmos, therefore.
Well, yes. I mean, I think gravity acts as a final cause. In other words, I think it's attracting from the future. And certainly when the attraction, it works by attraction. And attraction means being pulled towards a future state. So if I hold something up and I let it go and it falls down, being pulled towards its future on the floor, as it were. And if the attractor of universal gravity got its way, as I say, it would result in the entire universe being pulled together, opposite the Big Bang. And the principle of levity in modern cosmology is really dark energy. So you have these two opposites, that if gravity took over, if that was the end of everything would collapse into a black hole and end up in total darkness. And if levity or dark energy is dominant, the universe would expand more and more at an accelerating rate. And Roger Penrose has pointed out that if that happened, there'd come a point where matter itself evaporated into light, until you'd end up with universal light, infinitely extended or almost infinitely extended. So these two principles, we still have them, levity and gravity, in our cosmology, and they're in a kind of balance with each other.
There is a sense of these older ideas returning in relation to new physics, and that these are tremendous new discoveries and speculations based upon modern physics. But it is interesting how those speculations bring back older ideas.
The old tradition, of course, is of the world soul, and in a sense, gravity takes on the role of the world soul. Plato and many other, and Plotinus and other philosophers thought that the whole universe has a soul, or is within a soul, and the soul held everything together. Well, that's what the gravitational field does. God the Father is the ground of being. What would be the reflection in the universe of God the Father? Well, I suppose gravity, is the gravitational field, according to Einstein, isn't in space-time, it is space-time. It's the actual container of everything that happens. So we have, in the gravitational aspect of matter, a reflection of God the Father, and in electric currents and electric flow and light itself, a reflection of the Holy Spirit, and in magnetic fields and formative fields in general, a reflection of the Logos. So anyway, that's one of the ways I've been thinking about it.
I like that notion because I feel that the impulse behind it is to sort of go with the flow of the modern physics, the modern understanding, but sort of push it to see what lies within it and around it and underneath it. Rather than a religious response, which might be to feel defensive against the science or even rejecting it. Because, at the end of the day, physics is a form of contemplation on the nature of reality. So why wouldn't these patterns reappear? And for all that physics is mostly mathematics, and that's a very sort of niche way of engaging with reality, perhaps these deeper patterns are the way that they can make sense to us too, and so can be in a kind of dialogue with the older traditions, revealing the pattern of things. So yeah, that's actually a very helpful notion, I think.